If you're watching this video, it means that Yu-Gi-Oh! The trading card game still exists. This is bad news. Hey everybody, it's your boy MBT. As you all know, as part of my Rothschildian machinations, I have been attempting to destroy Yu-Gi-Oh! For the better part of 2 years now. The pandemic, quarantine, that Reddit stock market thing, they're all in service to my one ultimate goal, finally putting Kazuki Takahashi's reign of terror to an end. So far I have been unsuccessful, but I think I know just what will finally push me over the top. A new ban list. I'm kidding, of course, but given the reception to my most recent Banlist and Wishlist video, you'd be forgiven for thinking that I wasn't. I want a ton of cards off the ban list. There's a lot on the list that no longer needs to be banned, limited, or semied, and suggesting so, in the minds of many YouTube commentators, is tantamount to original sin. Well, don't worry. I will promise you two things. Firstly, that these are my real opinions, I'm not making up cards for clout, and secondly, that every single one of these changes could be made without fundamentally altering how we play the Yu-Gi-Oh! Trading card game. All they would be are slightly less 2011 playables we'd have to keep in mind when building decks. Now, if you came here to prove me wrong, don't worry. You'll have a chance to do that as well, which I'll announce at the end of the video. But until then, let's check out what I've cooked up for this ban list season. We'll begin with the bans. Now, this should come as no surprise to anyone who watched my most recent video on this subject last Sunday, but I think there should only be one hit on the upcoming ban list, and it's the card you see in front of you. I actually like the current format a lot. I think there's a ton of interesting top decks, all of which have the capacity to take games off of each other. They present innovative and intelligent strategies, and a lot of duelists are able to find their niche no matter what they like, be you a combo player, a control player, or, dare I say it, a mid-range player. The variety of stuff you can play and ability to beat other decks hasn't been this equal since maybe TOS format, and you don't have to worry about Thunder Dragon Colossus. That said, there is one card that hangs over this format like a shadowy ghoul, and it's this one, True King of All Calamities. VFD sucks. He sucks. He is so miserable for every player at the table. He's a thorn in the side of pretty much every meta deck, including VW. He's not good in all matchups. Decks that play Torrential Tribute, for instance, love to see this sucker come down, but he's just good enough blind on the play that VW pilots will usually spend their first turn making this sucker no matter what, even through hand traps. Usually, they expend enough resources that if you out True King, they're not going to be able to rebuild in time to prevent an OTK, so when it comes to your draw phase, you're not exactly playing Yu-Gi-Oh!, are you? You're playing a different game, a game called Can I Out True King of All Calamities? If the answer is yes, you win. If the answer is no, you lose. Coin flips aren't very exciting. Also, finding the out to this card is kind of difficult. You can draw the Infinite Impermanence, but if they've also set up a Chuche, that does nothing. You can find the Forbidden Droplet, but if they have the Chuche, you have to have both a trap and a monster to prevent True King's effect from resolving. And unfortunately, even Dark Ruler No More can be outed, as Tombox pointed out on Twitter yesterday, by chaining Chuche, then chaining True King of All Calamities to the Chuche activation. There's just a lot of room for True King of All Calamities to play. It's a little too powerful, and I think it should be hit. Now, many people have expected if this happens, VW will turn into a Gotham-style hand loop deck. I say, let them. That version of the deck isn't particularly good. I think more likely what's going to happen is they're going to play a little more toolboxy and use their very powerful Synchro and Xyz monsters to outgrind the opponent. They'll play kind of like Salamangreat did, activating every name every turn to establish a resource loop that maybe only Eldritch can keep up with, and Eldritch will lose to the Shen Shen anyway. The only other card we have on the ban list is Wind Up Hunter, and this is for a reason that will become clear very quickly. Now it's time for the meat of this video, the cards I think can come off the list. Now, I tried to be as liberal with unhits as possible, despite what marks might say, because I think it's poggers when a card goes from 0 to 3. However, these banned cards probably have to stay at 1. We're going to begin with Blaster, Dragon Ruler of Infernos. Now, for those of you who don't know, Tempest, another Dragon Ruler, is currently off the list as well. However, this is probably all of the Dragon Rulers we can take off. Dragon Rulers have a problem where if there's a critical mass of them, they become a problem very quickly. Blaster is the second weakest, and I think he could get a chance to shine. Next up is Chicken Game. Chicken Game enables a lot of FTKs, but most of them revolve around a field spell card called Pseudo Space, which allows you to cycle itself for a field spell in the graveyard. Only being able to do that one time is not particularly problematic, and Chicken Game is a very skill-testing card, as hilarious as that sounds to say. When it's being used in FTKs, obviously it's just Upstart Goblin, but if it sits on the field for a while, both players actually play a Chicken Game. If you've had a chance to play with this card, you know what I'm saying, and if you've had a chance to play with this card at FTK, I wish you Godspeed in hell. We've got one copy of Heavy Storm as well. Harpy's Feather Duster came off. I think the fear with Heavy Storm is that you could theoretically use it to proc your own spells and traps that trigger on destruction, but what's the best you're getting out of that? Eldritch spell traps? You can proc those by activating them, you know? In terms of extra deck monsters, we've got two. Danglong is the card I am most concerned about. He's a house. It's not worth pretending like this card isn't very strong and wouldn't see play. However, I think in the context of what you're allowed to do in Yu-Gi-Oh! Nowadays, he kind of pales in comparison. He's also got a huge deck building cost. You have to play a ton of really bad cards in your deck to make this work. I'd like to see someone try to do so. We're also on Saruya Skulldread. This is the only other card we've moved from 3 to 1, and it's because a lot of the list is plagued with really powerful deep draw enablers, cards that are only good if you can draw your entire deck. The only way to do that usually is to resolve multiple copies of Saruya Skulldread, so if we put him to 1, we avoid that issue entirely. Behold, the unlimited list! I'll give you a second to take in all 54 cards I think could go to 3 today. And I'll give you in Farfa's chat a second to type KEKW. I'd also appreciate if you'd follow me on twitch.tv/mbtYugiOh, twitter.com/mbtYugiOh, and youtube.com/mbtYugiOh. Thanks in advance. Now, I have a defense of every single one of these cards. Some of them more well thought out than others, but realistically, I think they could all come back to 3. I won't pretend there wouldn't be gameplay ramifications. Pankratops, for example, is a very strong card that would see heavy meta play, but I think the changes would make Yu-Gi-Oh! Better. We'll begin with a copy of Red Eyes Darkness Metal Dragon. This card received a hard once per turn last year and is no longer an issue. Lithosogem seems scary the first time you read it. It destroys earth monsters like Baby Sarasaurus, until you realize the dinosaur destroys every single Baby Sarasaurus in their deck the first turn anyway. This is an extender they don't really need. The payoff used to be having a 9-star on field was good for VFD setups, but we're banning VFD. Masterpiece, the True Draco Slaying King, is a card I got a lot of crap for putting to 1 last time, and then it flopped immensely. This guy could come to 3 no problem. It is a huge investment to summon this card, so much so that when he was at 3, Draco players would routinely play 2. Regardless, do you seriously think anyone's going to lose to True Draco in 2021? The deck is miserable, and if your game plan revolves around summoning an untargetable Bungus, boy do I have bad news about the answers players are packing for Dragoon. Pankratops is a very powerful card. He would see heavy sideboard play, but I think he's an equalizer that does something that no other equalizer does. Attacks. I think that rocks. I would like decks to be able to not only clear their opponent's board with stuff like Lightning Storm, but also potentially put on positive pressure with cards like this. And I think matches that come down to an unanswered Pankratops are very interesting. Astrograph is fine without Electromite. I said it. I put all 3 dangers to 3. This is a bit of a contentious move. Classically, these were very good in deep draw decks, but remember, we did limit Saruya to 1. I urge you to ask yourself, in what deck would you play 3 of each of these cards? If you answered Orchist, or PK Fire, yeah, that's fine. Those decks need the help. If you answered anything else, you're probably wrong. The dangers actually aren't fantastic in critical mass. Originally, they were okay as a way to link spam and draw additional cards, but outside of that, they don't have a ton of application. Dynamite Knight, the True Draco Fighter, is questionable. This card's very powerful, no doubt, but I still think the True Draco is just not powerful enough, especially with 1 copy of Dragonic Diagram, to stand up to the modern metagame. Realistically, what is it going to do if it loses the die roll against VW? What is it going to do if it wins the die roll against VW? Set a continuous trap? Destiny Hero Malicious is also contentious. I think this card might be too good at 3. Obviously, 1 is frustrating, and I don't want to keep it at 2 because it'd be the only card on the semi-limited list, so we're going to try it. But mark my words, It's a very powerful extender for warrior decks, an archetype that already has a lot of support and is a couple of extenders away from unbreakable Infernoble Knight setups. I hope it does not come to that over the course of this tournament. Infernity Archfiend is fine as long as Launcher is under wraps. Perform House Skullcrobat Joker, another pendulum hit that Electromite has freed. Dark Grepher. So the reason this card was originally put to 1 is because Armageddon Knight was limited, and they didn't want people to just double up on lost Armageddon Knights with Dark Grepher. Dark Grepher is a much worse card than Armageddon Knight, and while there are some decks that would make use of 3 copies, things like Orchist, for example, would like to see it, I think that's generally fine. I struggle to think of a deck in which this is a broken effect. Double Iris Magician. I'm so sorry. Pendulum is not going to be playable. It's not going to be playable. Phantom Skyblaster is a weird one. This is a card that saw heavy play, was limited, and then no one ever summoned ever again. I think we're at the point where summoning this card late into your combo is either going to eat a hand trap, removal spell, or be a part of a setup that is already unbreakable. Normal summoning it as your starter is terrible, and giving up your normal summon for a late in the turn Link 4 means that more likely than not, you aren't using your normal summon to summon a starter, and most decks need to do that. Gen X Ally Birdman. This is a weird one. This was put on the list for loop reasons, I believe with Divine Wind of Mist Valley. Now, we've unlimited both of them because I don't think the loops are necessarily consistent enough to worry about, but I'd like someone to prove me wrong. Night Assailant was put to 1 because you can loop Night Assailants, targeting another copy of Night Assailant with the Night Assailant and discarding infinitely. There are not a lot of really good outlets for infinite discard, and more importantly, getting 2 Night Assailant into your hand is a pipe dream. Morphing Jar was put to 1, I think for Dark World reasons originally. It's been a long time. More importantly, it has applications in Empty Jar. Empty Jar is viable. There are a ton of ways to enable it between Gallant Granite and Photon Papley Operative, but without Cyber Jar, I think it's probably okay. It's also very easy to board against. If you have a Droll and Lock anywhere in your sideboard, you automatically win the matchup. Cyberstein. This card sucks. It's not a good card. I'm sorry to say. Back in the day, what you would do is a Saruya combo to summon the Cyberstein and then use Cyberstein's effect to make it Exterio or something. That's not enough anymore. Normaling a Cyberstein, making a big bungus, going to 3,000 and passing is just going to get you killed by pretty much everything in the format. Yatagarasu. I'm going to say a hard truth. Chat doesn't want to hear this, I know. This card sucks. This card is PP bad. One of the worst cards remaining on the ban list in any capacity. Yatagarasu was banned because of applications with a couple of other cards. Back in the day, you could use Chaos Emperor's Dragon's effect, sending a Witch of the Black Forest from your side of the field to the graveyard to search a Yatagarasu and lock your opponent out with no cards in their hand or on field. The problem in that interaction was not the Yatagarasu. It was the Chaos Emperor Dragon, and to a lesser extent the Witch of the Black Forest, neither of which we need to worry about anymore. Right now, spending your normal on a Yatagarasu does absolutely nothing. There are decks that can search her, Shino Birds, for instance, have a decent time doing so, but no deck gives a shit about their draw phase anyway. Things like Eldritch are going to be playing out of their graveyard regardless. They will absolutely care more about resolving hard once per turns than finding out what's on the top of their deck. Instant Fusion, weird card. This card is at 1 despite the fact that it has a hard once per turn. That's because it's kind of really good in stuff like Prank Kids. It's a sweet extender. It insulates against hand traps, but I don't think it does so in a way that is debilitating, chokes the life out of the format, or changes the game in any way that having 1 copy of Fusion wouldn't. Repeat activations is no big deal either, since games usually don't last to the point where a second one would be impactful. A Hero Lives. This is a frightening one. It is not technically once per turn, but you don't have any monsters on your side of the field, usually only at the start of your main phase 1. There are some really powerful setups this enables. For example, if you activate a Hero Lives, get Stratos, get Vision Hero Vion, and send Malicious, you are about 5 links deep in a warrior combo. But I think that it's okay. Would be open to be proven wrong about this one. Sekka's Light. This card is hilariously limited. The payoff for this deck was that you got to play 3 Pot of Greed if you played no other spell traps. Now you don't even get to do that. The deck it was originally part of was this, like, Block Dragon BA build that just wouldn't cut it anymore. One Day of Peace. This card is very funny. I think it would mess up time a lot, but it also could totally come to 3. Reasoning. This card gets people in a tizzy because they think of Infernoid and fear having to say one more than one time. The problem with Infernoid has nothing to do with the ability of it to mill its entire deck. It's very able to do that. It has to do with the fact that none of the Infernoids win the game and you can just negate their effects. Eventually they'll run out of Noids, and you will not run out of floatable monsters. No competent deck is losing to Noids, even with 3 reasoning. Slash Draw. This card was limited because of an FTK you could set up with Saruya by stacking the top of your deck. If we limit to 1 Saruya, you can't do that. Card Destruction. Card's terrible. This card is awful. Playground Yu-Gi-Oh! Players think this is the greatest card ever printed, and I don't know why. They think that you're minusing your opponent by firing their hand to the graveyard. You're not. Card Destruction is minusing yourself to cycle your opponent's hand in a format where the graveyard functions as a second hand. If you can't see why that's game-losingly bad, I don't know what to tell you. Gold Sarcophagus was limited for Thunder Dragon reasons, and I think we do not need to fear that deck anymore. Into the Void I want to put a 3, so there's an actual interesting decision point in terms of deciding to play this or Upstart Goblin. This card's kind of hard to activate and resolve at profitable times. Maybe it'd show up in Endymion Pendulum, but again, Endymion Pendulum, you can have anything you want, but Electromite, I'm so sorry for what happened to you. Final countdown could come to 3. I think this is at 1 for, like, lore reasons. Yeah, I can't think of another reason why this wouldn't be at 3. Draco Face-Off is a remnant of Konami being afraid of Pepe in 2016. I don't care if you're going to summon a Master and a Luster from deck. Called by the Grave. This would absolutely impact gameplay. It would be monumentally strong. That said, I do think that fighting over hand traps is actually pretty cool. There's also ways to play around it. Playing Bell main deck, for example, not only has applications against pretty much every deck right now, but also stops Called by the Graves. Chain Strike. This card could come to 3 and burn would still suck. Dimensional Fissure. OCG has this floodgated 3. I like interacting with the graveyard. Come on! Symbol of Heritage features in a lot of FTKs surrounding Lonefire Blossom that I don't think are consistent enough to warrant this card's status on the ban list. I would like to see what it can do. Butterfly Dagger Elma is a card that none of you have read. Least of all me. You saw my History of Yu-Gi-Oh! Match. It's not good. People talk about how it is infinite fodder in an Infernoble deck. It's not, and already Phoenix Blade is. It's part of a 3-card combo that includes Gearfried the Iron Knight, this card, and Royal Magical Library to draw your entire deck. If you're finding a 3-card combo and including so many cards in your deck that you're able to kill with like a magical explosion, go for it. It's going to be pretty difficult to find all of those over the course of 1 turn. Most importantly, they can probably just kill any piece of that, or droll you out of the game either. The reason that we hit this at the 11th hour last time is because chat found a Vylon combo that Rada had alluded to in a video that was some sort of FTK with this card, but it turns out not only is it a 4-card combo, it doesn't use this card. 10,000 IQ commenters again. Divine Wind of Mist Valley. This card is also responsible for some FTKs, some loops with Gen X ally Birdman. I would be interested to see if it's good enough. This card I would like to see unhit because it might actually get played by some decks. For example, Bird Up might find room for this card if it were at 3. I think that would be pretty cool and support an underpowered typing in Wind. Trickstar Light Stage is a 1-card Dragoon. Everything's a 1-card Dragoon. Come on! Spiral Resort can easily come to 3 because we banned Master Plan. Magical Midbreaker Field gets a lot of discussion because it insulates FTKs, but it doesn't really. FTKs in this format are kind of fragile. There's not a lot of ability for them to find their starters. If you have like 6 hits for the Dark Warrior combo, for example, you are having to find one of those 6 and diluting your deck with cards like this as well. What's more, Magical Midbreaker Field does not beat every hand trap. It beats some of them. And that's probably not good enough. You're putting a card in your deck in order to beat some hand traps in some matchups some of the time and hoping that you're not breaking on it. Seems unlikely. Magical Explosion. This card could very much go to 3. Magical Explosion decks aren't consistent, they aren't good enough, and more importantly, the game isn't decided based on having 2 or 3 Magical Explosion at your disposal. Realistically, you would play 2 Magical Explosion, which is a 1-card improvement over 3 Blasting the Ruins, what these decks play now. Neither of them change the math. You're still going to have to draw your entire deck. Time Seal. Another Yatagarasu type card. This sucks. You can't activate it before your opponent's first draw phase, so the earliest it hits is turn 4. Who cares? Macrocosmos, same with Dimensional Fissure. I love this card. This card is so cool. Please let me banish cards from the graveyard. And finally, True King's Return. This is currently a 2, and if it came to 3, I would not bat an eyelash. I would actively not wake up from slumber. The extra deck's a little interesting. Trishula, Dragon of the Ice Barrier, is not once per turn, and as a result, you can banish 3 cards from your opponent's hand, but if you find the material to make 3 Trishula over the course of the turn, go for it! There's a reason that Water isn't tier 1, despite the fact that it can rip 4 to 5 cards with relative consistency out of the opponent's hands. Cards do everything nowadays. All you gotta keep is 1, and you'll win. Ignister Prominence, the Blasting Draco Slayer. Why is this on the list? Dulorn is getting an errata. Great. TG Hyperlibrarian is a remnant of olden days when long, uninterruptible synchro combos ruled the world and Level Eater was unbanned. At 3, this card would do almost literally nothing. Speaking of, Diagusto Emerald suffered the same fate. Originally hit for, I think, Zodiac and its applications in a World Chalice FTK. 3 copies of this will potentially enable that World Chalice FTK, but not in any sort of consistent contention that we actually have to be worried about it. Tellarknight Tolmaeus is a remnant of a time that overlaying for CDI was so broken that you couldn't possibly let a deck that got 3 level 4s on its side of the field to do so. It also has a turn skip, but investing so much into the turn skip in our practice literally leaves you with Tolmaeus. You have to draw lethal off the top of your deck with no other cards on field. It's almost impossible. Salamangreat Mirage Stalio. Yeah, okay. Salamangreat is a good deck. No getting around it. Mirage Stalio would be a huge boon to the deck, but the deck hasn't topped in months. It's currently lining binders. I don't think the problem with Salamangreat has anything to do with its ability to access Mirage Stalio and Salamangrates from the deck. It has everything to do with its low ceiling. Consistency isn't an issue for this archetype, so unbanning something that made it more consistent wouldn't resolve its outstanding problems. It would just make the deck a little more accessible a small amount of the time. Zenmaity is a Reddit hit. Reddit clamors for this shift every single ban list, and I would like to see it happen. We saw Windups do some really fun stuff in the last format, and I'd like to see if they can do so as well. Firewall Dragon's getting an errata, and Rusty Bardish is already at 1. The difference between 1 and 3 isn't particularly important, since all of its effects are hard once per turns, and it can't be used as link material. If you want to follow up a Bard turn with a Bard turn, be my guest. So that's that. I think realistically, every single one of these cards could come off the ban list no problem. If you disagree with me, prove it. I'll be hosting, as I did last ban list season, a tournament to see if these FTKs that you all think up in the YouTube comment sections can actually compete against the Meta Titans, the VWs, the Drytrons, the Zuliches of the world. If you think you've stumbled upon a build that my list fails to account for, build it! I urge you to come to the Discord below, both in the description and the pinned comment. Navigate your way to the Moron Banlist Tournament channel and submit a list. I'll be in contact with you by the end of tomorrow, Monday, February 22nd, 2021, to let you know if I think your list is sufficiently janky. And if selected, over the course of the next 2 days at your leisure, you will play 4 rounds maximum against other people doing the same thing for a box of the most recent set. We will then watch the replays in cinematic glory on stream Wednesday. I hope to see what you cook up, and I hope to be proven wrong. Though after last time's results, I don't think it's very likely.